Hi everyone, welcome back to Paisa Bolta. Yes, Anand is still not in the studio. Yes, I did just return from Bangalore, drove down today morning, rather tired. Anand asked me to fill in for him, so I'm filling it in. You would have seen me yesterday talking about what's happening in the US market and this concept of FOMO and where the markets are right now. And there seems to be a lot of exuberance in the market. And on my break, had a chance upon reading a book by a person called Barbara Kellerman, and it's a book called Leadership from Bad to Worse and What Happens When Bad Festers. It's a lovely book. I would highly recommend all of you read this or give it at least a glance. In this book, what she talks about, Kellerman explores is how progression from leadership from bad to worse happens. And I thought it's very prudent and relevant to read it in the current state the world is in, where we are in lack of good leadership. Be it from corporate places like Boeing, what's happening, to global places where we see politicians behaving very badly. I'm not naming parties here, I'm not naming countries here, I'm not mentioning anything like that. Each person is uh, has facts and news available to them and they are allowed to freely make up their own minds. I'm not pushing any agenda here. That said, what she does talk about in this book is how the leadership and fellowship go hand in hand together. That a leadership requires fellowship for this thing to happen. One leads to the other, and it can happen one pushing the other's agenda in a negative dynamic loop. Then intervention, if you don't intervene in an early stage of society, what can happen can be very devastating to the world and society by large. So she does many case studies, and it's a lovely read. And she talks about from corporate to politics. She takes different case studies historically and current leadership crop and European leaders, American leaders, and she does a nice case study and finally illustrates it down to four key phases this thing goes through. How does the bad leadership development happen? First is envisioning a utopian future. Utopian future means imagining a world that it's perfect, but it's beautiful, where everything, whatever you desire, is going to happen. That there is a paradise I'm going to take you to, be it whatever shape or form, whichever way you see it. So the leader paints this beautiful picture of a world which is in a dreamscape for you, and they promise to make it into a reality. When they start doing this, they speak very charismatically and start gaining followers, and that starts creating traction in society. This embarks on a harmful course, and this is when things go from bad to worse, because as this person gains more and more followers, they start to look more and more as a plausible leader for politicians, and they start flocking to this person with their own agenda, trying to manipulate this person or this position or this for the stronghold they have over their followers into thinking they can contain them and use them to steer something in their own political agenda. But things can turn very sideways very fast. As this leader gains more and more traction, things can go sideways, and people who thought they were steering the boat realize they're not steering anything and they're being taken along by the current. And they're very helplessly stuck on board of a ship which they didn't want tend to be on. So here she talks about the fellowship's role. She said the fellowship's role is to emphasize being the people who intervene on these kind of things. They're called the good fellowship. People argued that outside this leadership position have responsibility to avoid becoming bad followers, and they possess the power to change and challenge and prevent this kind of escalation of poor leadership from the outset. That means preventing it, cutting it in the bud. That we as societies have good fellowship people in our society who can see these things cropping up and nipping them in the bud. But of course, this kind of urgency to action and call to action has its own problems, which is who determines what is good, who determines what is bad. That is where the essence of the problem lies. So, that is left to you as a reader. It's open ended. What you feel and what you think is right or wrong is completely up to you. But action is a must. So, she concludes that the sense of urgency and particularly an eye towards the American electoral process is what she's talking about. In her book, she calls and reserves call for action, and she stresses upon the importance of timely intervention against bad leadership to prevent downward spirals. and time is of the essence, and combating festering poor leadership and leadership practices is very important. What the book left me with is the idea that yes, this is what the world is currently at. True. But by reading books like this and understanding where we are, I hope to influence younger generations and younger people with better views and better mindset and better ideas, that in the future, at least if this situation is like that, step by step, like how we got ourselves into this mess, we can definitely get ourselves out of this mess. How do we get out of this mess? I draw inspiration from n number of leaders who I admire and look at, who have always said it is best to take things to the people and expect them to understand by presenting facts to them, and slowly change will happen even if it takes time. Yes, democracy is a wonderful thing, but do realize democracy is not perfect, and democracy can shift with the tides of time back and forth, as we've seen in history. So, what is important is preserving our democracy, because democracy is the best thing we have right now, until and unless we humans discover something better than democracy. Because at least in democracy, we have something as an equal voice, we're all equal, or at least presumptively equal, and we try to work as a society and as a community as a whole towards improving ourselves. So it's a wonderful book. It gives a lot of food for thought. And I thought, since Sunday market is closed, and then something different I wanted to offer you. It is not on a lecture or anything. It is just something I read, which I thought I'll share with you, and I hope you find it useful and interesting. And if there are books which you're reading which are useful and interesting to our audience, wider audience, please put them in the comments down below. And maybe I can pick up on those books. If I've not read it, definitely read it and come back to you and tell you what I think about it. I would strongly encourage everyone in our channels, especially uh, these investment channels, to read more and spend more time reading than talking and uh, speculating, because stronger our knowledge base of knowledge is, better informed decisions we can make. Charlie's always mentioned this, Warren has always mentioned this. Any leader worth his salt really reads a lot of books. So a good sign of a good leader for me is a person who reads a lot of books. So I strongly encourage you to read books too. Thank you for watching the video today. I hope you found it informative and entertaining as always. And I'm sure Anand will be in the next one soon. Bye.